My name is Moulshri Joshi. I'm joining you all from New Delhi. I'm delighted to be a part of this conference and thank you for having me. Today I have a very short time to introduce the topic of industrial heritage in India. So I thought instead of taking an expert view and speaking from a distance to make sense of a long and complex history that spans an entire subcontinent, let me share some intimate experiences that have shaped my journey over the last 15 years with industrial heritage. I'm a member of TICI, and TICI has been crucial to informing a lot of these ideas to me through their annual conferences, which I cherish very much. So thank you once again for having me. And a lot of what I will talk about in these short 10 minutes is experiences that foreground my work as a young architect, as a woman architect in India. And it also forms a tapestry, a kind of background against which I have been examining the inventory of industrial heritage. This inventory has been a part of a lifelong, if I can say, a life project of sorts. I've been documenting sites across the Indian subcontinent for over 7 years now. And now this document spans about 400 historic industrial sites. Yet, I remain far from being able to build an authoritative document on what we might call industrial heritage in the context like ours. If past and pastness was the only measure of what we have, then the difficulty we face is a difficulty of distance. Industrialization is very much a part of our lives. Unlike parts of Europe and America, industrialization is ongoing. And this past, which is not yet past, trying to make sense of it with clarity is a tough job. It's like trying to photograph a car in a rear view mirror. It's constantly moving and it's always closer than it appears. And my greater difficulty to be able to speak in appreciative terms of what I see in this rear view mirror, if I can call it that, is not really that I see a car. What I see is a mangled car wreck, an accident site, where what is the machine and where are the bodies of the people, it's hard to distinguish. I will explain what I mean. When I was a teenager, I visited one such wreckage. I'm a city-born person, born and brought up in the comforts of a big metropolis. And it was my first experience of visiting a small-time factory. It was located off the highway on the way from Delhi to the city where Taj Mahal is located, and within a greater historic landscape famous for its glassware and glass production. And I visited a factory where they produced glass bangles. The space inside the factory was lit only by a ventilator, coated with years of soot and by molten glass being fired all over the ovens inside. Over a dozen small bodies, not much bigger than my own, maneuvered the flaming glass with long rods. The heat was indescribable. It seared my bones, it choked me, and I had to run out to get some fresh air. In that few seconds that I spent inside this factory, it was clear that the people that I noticed inside were not quite much bigger than my own size. And their faces were dark, just their eyes were lit, and the overall experience of being there was the closest I had imagined hell to be. It seemed that the journey to incredible India, which is really the site of our famous Taj Mahal, is lined with these little invisible factories that produce the most ordinary things like glass bangles. I returned with a lot of discomfort, with shock, with guilt, with anger, and a lot of curiosity about what really goes on inside these spaces. A decade later, as a young architect, really it was my first big project, I found myself at the site of the former Union Carbide factory, the ground zero of the infamous disaster of 1984, where an estimated 20,000 people died in the immediate aftermath of the gas leak. The pesticide plant, located in Bhopal, leaked a poisonous gas which spread over the city in the midnight, and people who were sleeping, people died in their sleep. Of course, the estimates by the company and from the government are vastly different, but what remains is that the people and the people of the city were unable to access medical relief. The trees and animals in the city perished, and it's written in accounts that the city ran out of cloth to cover and bury their dead. What is also true is that the company fled soon after after this disaster, and the Indian government settled with the company for a $470 million case, giving people a small compensation for the large recurring generational damages that they had suffered. This site was another one of those car wrecks that I had an opportunity to witness and to learn from up close. The structure of the factory, the real tangible remains of this disaster, once really grand and beautiful, the site was conceived as a temple of modern India, a beautiful factory which now remains rusting, a rusted piece of metal, crumbling concrete, dense overgrowth. You can see in the photo, the factory lies right behind this children's playground. Laboratories are strewn with chemical bottles, literally frozen in time over the last 35 years. And yet, what we decide and how we imagine our future to be in India today is extremely modern and industrial. The imagination that we will be a stronger nation is drawn on an idea of being industrial, a manufacturing hub, a place that makes. Factories, mines, dams, highways, they guide our public works today. Last week, again, a third car wreck, an accident site, if I can call it that. Last week I visited another one of the mining districts in the country, and this area, one of the most backward regions in terms of quality of life, in terms of education facilities and medical access to medical facilities, is in fact one of the richest places, full of minerals waiting to be dug out of the earth. And the fact that the richest place is also the least educated is not a coincidence. It's a relationship that is a crucible within which industrialization takes place. I've spoken of this before, this paradigm, during several talks where this colonial idea of industrialization, of development, where the poorest people subsidize development for the richest few, is really a familiar pattern. And the site that I visited last week is a mining district. The photos here are from another region close by to where I went. And this mining district has been simmering for 100 years. There are people who draw their livelihood gathering coal from here and literally living on a giant simmering coal field under their feet. Talking about industrial heritage today, in any other terms, is to extend these multiple crises that we see that make up our present existence and to deny them. Adding heritage to the word in an Asian context, in a way, weaponizes this apparent oxymoron called industrial heritage and makes it fit to be used for as another developmental tool, capable to sanitize our realities of the present and the past. Look at these dystopian photos from Jharia, one of the richest coal reserves in India, where 400,000 people continue to derive their livelihood from this burning landscape. It's unimaginable that in 2020 such things continue to exist and yet remain to be seen. How will we then define industrial heritage? And without an honest definition of what we have and what we use as, where we borrow our definitions from, this kind of a lack of this definition which we define for ourselves contributes to the speed at which sites like these continue to be converted into new fancy uses. And of course architects are at the forefront of this kind of a development which erases any chance for us to encounter their real lived realities or their difficult past. The thing is that the present lived reality of industrial landscapes is really powerful enough to change the status quo. It's powerful enough to push us to rethink the values of industrial heritage. And yet, what I observed with every mill that becomes a shopping mall and every paint factory that's quietly dismantled to build a school is that these sites are being made to fit into an outdated definition of industrial heritage. Their preservation, which includes not just careful preservation of their tangible remains, but also a sustainable remediation, a clear-eyed, honest, inclusive interpretation, all of this is being dismantled to make way for their, by dismantling these sites. So what we are trying to do is to push a new kind of heritage making to take place. Just as values of the past should not be imposed on the present, a borrowed understanding and the meaning of industrial landscape will be totally unfit for the context of India or for Asia for that matter to decide the meaning of its own industrial past. Good, outdated ideas borrowed from elsewhere or imposed by others cannot guide this new wave that we are experiencing at the moment of studying India's and Asia's vast and complex industrial heritage. On the screen, you will see some of the sites traversed by Mahatma Gandhi on foot. He went from sites of industrial production, sites where workers were demanding rights, demanding justice, looking at, and mobilizing them and gathering their voices. These became the sites underpinning the national movement and the freedom and the struggle for freedom from the British rule. So the story of industrialization in India is deeply rooted in these ideas of justice. This is the salt factory here, the salt producing district of Dandi. So these good ideas that we are borrowing from elsewhere need to be replaced. The ideas need to come from the place that they speak about. They need to be spoken by people who have profited the least from industrialization. It cannot be that, like the current debate on decolonization, led by precisely those who continue to benefit from an equal world. This is the moment for all of us to dig where we stand, to tell our stories, to listen to others, and to make space for those who have had none so far. Thank you very much. I leave you with some more images.